Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around I've got 3 science fiction movies. The first one is half science fiction, half horror. The second one is bad. I'll be honest with you. Bad science fiction movie, bad movie in general. Weird as hell, but bad. And the third one is the one that you're really going to like. It's a modern science fiction movie. It's for young adults, but don't let that stop you. But it's got some really important things to say about lots of stuff. And it says it in a really entertaining way. So let's get started with the first one, which is a Mexican horror movie from 1962, which is known in English as The Witch's Mirror. It came out of this wonderful box set from Powerhouse Indicator, Mexico Macabre, which has a lot of good movies. I've watched 3 of the 4 so far, and they've all been bangers. Totally fun, totally great, beautiful transfers of these things. And I highly recommend you get a copy of this one because apart from anything else, it is region free. Every Blu-ray player will play these. And the movie is The Witch's Mirror, also known as El Espejo de la Bruja. There is the cover. These are made of cardboard, by the way, and I really like that. A lot less plastic in these particular releases than there are in other ones. And I really appreciate that effort to make things a little more environmentally friendly. I don't know whether it's going to be as long lasting as something made of plastic, but good on them for making an effort there. And I'll show you the inside cover as well. There's the inside cover. And it's a weird movie in the best possible way. I'm really getting into Mexican horror. I think I'm going to have to find a lot more of these. But in The Witch's Mirror, which was directed by Chano Ureta, you get a title screen come up that tells you that magic and witchcraft are real. They're not, but it tells you that. You just got to assume for the sake of the movie that they are. And there's lots of Catholic propaganda in the intro about good versus evil. And like all Mexican horror movies of the time, it very much is based in a kind of mythological Catholicism, which makes it very different than, say, an American horror film or an English one, or even a European one. It's about a servant of a wealthy family called Sarah, who is a witch, though the family doesn't know it. The man of the house, Eduardo, is a scientist, and his wife is the goddaughter of the witch. The goddaughter's name is Elena. And through a magical mirror, Sarah the witch sees the future and sees that Eduardo is going to poison and kill Elena, which indeed he does. But she brings Elena back to life as a ghost. There's going to be a science part in this, believe me. It's going to take a little while, though. And so Eduardo buries her, not knowing that she's resurrected as a kind of ghost spirit, something or other. Maybe a zombie. It's a little hard to tell. They don't really put labels on these things. And so Eduardo goes away and marries another woman called Deborah. And Deborah is a bit of a null. There's a bit where Eduardo tries to kiss her and she kind of pulls away. And she's played by Rosita Arenas. And she gets an interesting arc in this one. The first wife, Elena, starts haunting Eduardo and starts appearing in mirrors and starts kind of saying, "You killed me, you bastard," all that kind of stuff. As a part of this haunting, Eduardo, who has poor impulse control, throws an oil lamp at the mirror where he sees his first wife, the one he killed, not realizing that it's all an illusion, and he's actually thrown the lamp at Deborah, his new wife, and set her on fire. She flees the room in flames and ends up hideously disfigured and hideously burned and covered in one of the worst bits of bandaging you're ever going to see in a movie. I'll actually show, I've got it on here. There's a bandage she has on. So it's almost like Eduardo decided to give her the ugliest bandages he could possibly find and make her look like a golem. So Eduardo's pretty racked by this, mostly because his wife is suffering and he's also a bit of a bastard. And so he decides to start going eyes without a face on it and finding corpses of beautiful young women and transplanting their skin onto Deborah to make her all better. That's where the science comes in. This one borrows heavily from Georges Faraju's Eyes Without a Face. So he starts doing the transplants, and the police get alerted when his sidekick, who helps him with the operations, gets haunted by later and told to go to the police and confess everything, otherwise you'll be haunted forever, you bastard. So he does that. And the other thing Eduardo decides to do is he decides he's going to transplant a dead woman's hands onto Deborah to replace her severely manky hands, at which he goes to do, and he's got a set of hands just sitting on a table waiting, because you don't have to preserve them at all. They just have to sit around like wax sculptures, which indeed they were. And while he's away doing something else, the witch changes the hands for the hands of the dead wife, and they transplant the hands of the dead wife onto Deborah. So you got a little bit of the hands of Orlak here, or Mad Love. So there's lots of little bits of other movies that this movie pitches unashamedly and decides to make part of this weird hybrid of science fiction and horror that is The Witch's Mirror. Of course, the hands start trying to choke Eduardo. Everything goes west, and nobody ends up covered in glory in this, except for the witch, who wanders away totally unscathed to kill people another day. I like this movie a lot. It's just mad stuff. It's in black and white. It's in Academy ratio. It's not widescreen at all. It runs a tight 76 minutes, and it crams a lot of other movies into this one. But it does it in an immensely entertaining way, and the deadly seriousness with which all of the participants act, playing these over-the-top, totally baroque roles, really worked for me. I love this movie. I think it's mad. I think it's funny. If you can find a copy, definitely watch it. And you'll go down that rabbit hole of Mexican horror films, which I'm now diving head first down. And you're going to have a lot of fun just watching this one. And once you get what the Mexican horror movies of the time were doing, and you kind of accept the genre and the worldview of these things, you're going to have a great time with them, and I highly recommend it. Now, next movie I got for you was a mistake. I made a mistake watching it because it's not very good. But as some of you know, in January this year, I'm only watching movies I haven't seen before, so I thought I'd dive in and see what kind of at least tangentially science fiction offerings Netflix has for me, because I've seen tons of movies. I was looking for something else to do for the video, so I found a little cowpat called Infinite, starring Mark Wahlberg. It's also got some good actors in it. It's got Chiwetel Ejiofor. It's got Toby Jones in it. So, you know, the supporting cast is pretty good. But here's the interesting thing about it. Before I tell you what the movie's about, I will tell you this up front. It's directed by Anton Fuqua, who did the Equalizer movies with Denzel Washington, and who did them a lot better than he did this movie. It's a weird thing, but Netflix has this habit of doing action films with kind of well-known actors, and most of the money gets paid to the actors, which have one-word titles. It's almost like it's become a trope with them. It's become part of the AI matrix of Netflix-made movies. Now, the movie's loosely based on a novel from 2009 called The Reincarnationist Papers, which one of the film's producers happened to find a copy of while backpacking in Nepal. I'm not kidding. It's true. So they got the rights to the book. They decided to make the movie in 2019, 2020. And they got a script that has almost nothing to do with the book, because that's how Hollywood, including Netflix, rolls. The movie starts out with a big action sequence where a guy called Heinrich Treadway is being chased by a guy called Bathurst. We don't know who these people are. And a couple of his friends are asking him about the egg, which he's stolen. The egg is the MacGuffin of the movie. And there's this enormous car chase, which is kind of like Wish.com, Fast and Furious kind of stuff. And Treadway escapes and hides the egg. This all takes place in Mexico City in 1985. In 2020, in New York City, there's a guy called Evan McCauley. So you cut to 2020 from 1985. You got a guy called Evan McCauley, played by Mark Wahlberg, who suffers from schizophrenia, which is a horrible disease. I'm not trying to make fun of schizophrenia at all. Because he's got a shaky past with acts of violence and institutionalization, he can't get a job. He needs meds, so we see him go for a job as a maitre d' in a posh restaurant and not get it, and then chuck the shits at the people who are recruiting him for the job and tell him that he hasn't got it. Now, Evan needs money. He needs money for medication. He needs money to pay the rent. And this is where the disconnect comes up, because it's crazy. So he forges a katana which he trades with a drug dealer for the medication he needs, because the American health system's pretty rotten. Now, here's where I disconnected from the movie, because the guy can't afford his meds, he can't afford his rent, but he can afford a forge and a workshop and all of the bits and pieces you need to make a beautiful katana, because Evan is an immortal. He's an infinite. He's lived previous lives and he has skills from his previous lives. And in one of his previous lives, he was a Japanese sword maker. So he uses all the resources he doesn't have to make a sword and to trade it with this drug dealer for the drugs. The deal goes wrong. He escapes with the drugs and the sword, and he gets arrested. And then Bathurst turns up. And Bathurst isn't the guy you see at the start of the film. Bathurst is, in this case, Chiwetel Ejiofor playing the big bad. Now, there are two groups of infinites. Bear with me, there's a lot of backstory here. There are two groups of infinites. The nihilists, including Bathurst, who want to stop reincarnating in new bodies, and then at puberty you wake up and realise who you are, and you've got all these past lives and all of these skills, because Bathurst, all that happens to Bathurst in the womb. So Bathurst has to sit around for 9 months waiting to be born every time he's reincarnated. So he's part of the nihilists, and then there are the believers who want to improve the world and who have crazy cool science technology well above that of mortal men. So the nihilists have invented a gun which you go up to an infinite, shoot them in the back of the head, and you catch their soul in a computer chip so they can't be reincarnated. And Bathurst, Chiwetel Ejiofor, decides that he wants the egg because the egg contains nanotechnology that will destroy all life on Earth, which means that nobody can be reincarnated and Bathurst can finally die. So the rest of the film basically is lots of fights, lots of pew-pew, lots of heavy weaponry, most of it in Scotland, and they pretty much tear apart a Scottish castle as the believers try to get all the souls back and destroy the chips so that everybody can get reincarnated. Meanwhile, Bathurst is looking for the egg and finally gets it, and Marky Mark has to go and kill Bathurst, rescue the world from this little tiny egg which is full of nanotechnology that will kill everyone, and he does. There's a couple of other good people in this supporting cast. Jason Mantzoukas turns up as a hedonist called the Artisan, who helps them out and has all this really, really cool high-tech stuff. Toby Jones gets like 2 scenes and then gets killed. And the weird thing about this, and this is something I found fascinating and fascinatingly bad about this movie, is that it's low effort from everybody. Anton Fuqua has done much better work. Chiwetel Ejiofor isn't really leaning into the job. He's cashing a check here. Toby Jones does pretty good, but then Toby Jones never doesn't do really good. Sophie Cookson, who plays the female lead, just slides off your mind like an egg off Teflon. It's got every cliche of 2020's action films. It's got the drone shots over the city. It's got the speed ramping as the drones zoom in on a racing car. It's got slow-mo used in a very, very kind of Zack Snyder-y way. It's got a lead actor who has absolutely zero riz. Mark Wahlberg cannot play 2 different characters in one role. He can barely play one character in any movie. And there's no emotional arc for his character to discover that he's lived previous lives and to access all the knowledge and the wisdom and the skills of those previous lives. There's absolutely no arc to that character. There's a reason why he was nominated for a Razzie Award in this one, as indeed was the movie as Worst Picture. And Netflix does this a lot. They make action films which cost a fair bit of money, and they throw a lot of money at the stars to get their name value. They get on really good stunt performers. They set up some really good stunts. They use a bit of CGI every now and then when they can't block off a street and prang cars into one another. The results of these kinds of films are incredibly unmemorable. It's almost like Will Smith puts that neuralizer up against your face and suddenly you can't remember anything about the movie except a couple of explosions you saw. And I think somebody's got to write a book, and it's not going to be me, about these very, very mid Netflix action movies that turn up about 6 or 8 times a year and deliver pretty explosions and silliness, but are incredibly unmemorable. I like to remember movies. There's a value added to watching a movie and remembering it later and going back on it and analysing it and finding the things you like and understanding the way it's put together and doing all of that stuff, it gives you a longer, nice feeling about that movie. It's like chewing gum that never loses its flavour. Whereas this movie, Infinite, is chewing gum that loses its flavour the moment your taste buds hit it. So I'll watch that because I've kind of inflicted this thing on myself to only watch movies I've never seen before. The third one is the magic one. The third one is your hidden gem. The third one is the movie you should see. I found it on Amazon Prime when I was noodling through looking at other stuff. And I think somebody recommended it to me on the channel. I don't recall who. But thank you very much, whoever it was. And please put your hand up in the comments and tell me that it was you who told me about Landscape with Invisible Hand. This movie is everything I love about science fiction. It's from 2023 and it's an American science fiction film directed by Corey Finley, based on a 2017 novel by M.T. Anderson. It's a young adult novel. It stars Asante Black as a character called Adam, who's a high schooler who's also an artist. He sketches, he draws, he paints. He's really into art. Adam lives in a world that has been contacted by aliens about 3 or 4 years before. And these aliens, called the Vuv, look like slimy coffee tables, as one of the characters, who's actually Adam's father, played by William Jackson Harper, says in one part of the movie. The Vuv communicate by rubbing their paddle-like hands together. And we get translations of what they say, but everything about them is icky. And yet they have conquered the world by economic dominance. All of the Vuv technology is much better than human technology, so the money flows from ground level where all the people live, or at least most of them, up to the floating cities where the Vuv live with the human servants and human employees. And any job you can get with a Vuv is going to be an economic security for you and your family, whereas if you're not that lucky, you live on the ground and you're hand to mouth and you're eating food jelly that the Vuv provide for you. Adam goes to high school, of course, and meets a girl called Chloe who's living in a car with her father and her brother. And Adam likes Chloe and suggests to his mother, played by Tiffany Haddish, she's playing Beth the mother, and she's really good in this, suggests that Chloe and her family move into their basement so they've got somewhere to live. Now, Beth is a bit reluctant but agrees to it, and there is a lot of friction between the two families. Adam's family becomes the haves, and the white family living in the basement are the have-nots. Now, Adam and Chloe are getting close to each other and are starting a bit of a relationship. They have some potential to start a good relationship, and so she suggests to Adam that they wear the nodes on their head that are part of their education under the Vuv to start what is called courtship broadcasting, which is basically live streaming their relationship and all the feelings that they feel and all the physical sensations they feel to an audience of Vuv living up in the floating cities. If they get an audience, they get money, so it's a bit like YouTube or Twitch streaming or Kick streaming. So the relationship becomes monetized and commercialized by the Vuv. And the Vuv like what they see in the relationship. They start making money. They're able to buy real food rather than the jelly shit. They start to have some kind of tenuous and tentative economic security because of this. The pressures of keeping up the broadcasting for the Vuv starts eating away at their romance, and they get summoned up to one of the Vuv cities. And one of the Vuv says, "You're faking it, you're being a dishonest broker. Not only are we taking all of the money back, but we're going to sue you."
I want you to repay all funds you have received.
Wait.
We've already spent everything we made just to live.
Then I will take you to court, and your families will be in debt for approximately 6 generations.
Because your relationship has become not real, and therefore you're a bad actor in this particular medium. This is just the first part of the movie. There are 3 different phases. And the interesting thing is that that's when Adam's mother, Beth, starts coming in. And Beth used to be a good lawyer. But because of the economic circumstances changing as the Vuv economically conquer the earth, Beth is trying to find a job and ends up working in a soup kitchen, basically a kind of a food van that sells soup. It's a good living. It allows them to survive, but it's not what she was trained to do. So Beth goes up and cuts a deal with the Vulv and agrees to have one of the Vulv, who's fascinated with human customs, live with them. And the Vulv wants to be her husband because it's addicted to 1950s television comedies like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. And so it starts living with them, and it's an obnoxious creature, and starts trying to dominate the family unit and trying to tell Beth what to do with her life. That's the second part of this. And the third part is when the Vulv start closing down schools, including Adams. And all education is now going to be done through the nodes. There's not going to be any human intermediaries in the education process anymore. It's going to be direct Vulv education. And the school gets boarded up with plywood. It gets closed down. Everybody's doing school from home. But Adam sees the school and decides he's going to paint a giant mural on the wall, just expressing his feelings about how he feels about the Vulv invasion of the Earth. And he creates this giant mural work of art. And that's as far as I'm going to take you on the plot, because there's some important bits that follow that, which are horrible, which are soul-crushing, but ultimately they're very life-affirming. This movie is science fiction weaponized against capitalism in a good way, and particularly corporate capitalism and the monetization of people's private lives. Now, as somebody who works on the internet with YouTube, you're always aware of the boundaries between your life and what you're putting out as your channel and your content. Yes, I talk about Luna, I talk about going away on a holiday sometimes, I talk about things, but there's always a line you draw where your life is something separate from what you do. And the Vulv technology, particularly the courtship broadcasts, breaches that line between parasocial relationships and your life. That then becomes something that much bigger as Adam's artwork is brought to the attention of the Vulv. This movie does so many things right. It's about cultural imperialism, how one culture dominates another just by being a lot more monetized and a lot wealthier and a lot more attractive in some ways. There are bits in this movie where humans are starting to try to make themselves look more like the Vulv. They put slimy skin cream on to give their skin the texture of Vulv skin. People start shaving off their eyebrows because the Vulv don't like eyebrows. The parallel you can make between the hair and the skin thing is black people straightening their hair because the dominant culture is white, and white people tend to have straight hair. All the products and all the chemicals people put in the hair to appear like the dominant part of society and the dominant group in society. All of this gets played into Landscape with Invisible Hand in a really interesting way. It's solid science fiction because it says something about today in a science fiction matrix. And I don't mean in a Neo kind of matrix, but in a science fiction framework. And it does it really well. This is science fiction the way it should be done. Science fiction isn't just space opera, zoom, zoom, pew, pew. Science fiction is about us looking at our society and looking about trends in our society and looking about threats to our society in various ways through the medium of science fiction. This movie does it really well. The acting is all on point. Asante Black, Kylie Rogers playing Chloe, Tiffany Haddish particularly playing Beth, is strong as hell in this one. She started out as a comedian and stand-up comic, but she is doing really solid work in this movie. It's not one of the biggest movies in the world. I'm just trying to find what the budget was. It didn't make much money, but it would have been about $20 or $30 million budget. The special effects work is good. The Vulv spaceship and the good Vulv lifestyle and the Vulv environments are pretty damned horrible. It's such a cool movie. And this is the kind of science fiction that makes me not just watch old science fiction. This is the stuff where I kind of go, yep, this is new, this is fresh, this is pertinent to the concerns of modern society. And it's good science fiction and it's good entertainment. You should watch this movie, you should enjoy it, you should tell your friends about it as well. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, ring the little thing. You can also support the channel by donating at the YouTube page or becoming a channel member. You can also help the channel out by donating at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies. Next up, I've got some Indonesian superhero movies that are really cool and that I enjoyed. So I'm going to be doing those for the Sunday, Monday video. And Wednesday, who knows what's going to happen. So in the meantime, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some really cutting-edge science fiction movies that aren't getting enough love because they're not made by Disney. And I'll catch you next time.